how great the economy is doing right now. Let's just remember when this recovery started.
And now, Stacey Washington.
Welcome to the program. Guess what? It's Friday. We made it through the Kavanaugh hearings. Today is the last day. And there's so much news to cover. Welcome to Stacey on the Right here on American Family Radio, Urban Family Talk, urbanfamilytalk.com, AFR.net. That's how you can reach us and talk to us. Other than calling into the show, which today's Friday, so I'd be happy to talk to you. 866-963-2037. We have guests today. Guests, and it's going to be fantastic. We have in hour 2, Richard Lim. He's a popular guest on the show. Whenever he comes on, he's the host of the podcast, This American President. He's a researcher and a really great commentator from the historical perspective. He always brings us facts and information about our previous presidents and the history of our nation that are just so good. So we're going to be so happy to talk to him. And then we also have, in hour 1, Mason Weaver. He's back again. We're going to be talking about this whole Cory Booker. He wanted to break the Senate rules so badly, and he just wasn't able to pull it off. And then he made a spurious comparison of himself to Spartacus, which is interesting because Spartacus was like a barbarian, a fighter. This was no, he didn't get his nails done. This wasn't a guy who spent time in bathhouses and just, chilled. He was a warrior. And so Cory Booker declared he was Spartacus. And we have more to get into on that. And we're also going to be talking about kind of running down the week and talking about some of the successes of the Obama was successful in trying to take credit for the economy. We're going to talk about Trump's successes of the Trump economy, and how really President Trump has put something into motion that is kind of unprecedented. And while Barack Obama tries to take credit for it, Donald Trump is getting credit in some ways, like from CNBC and from a few sites, and there are some reports on it. But on television, you just don't see it. So we're going to unpack all of that. But right now, I want to get the rough news out of the way first. And so that has to do with immigration. And we're talking about a local sheriff who fears that sanctuary counties could spread mayhem throughout the entire country, as they're doing in his area of the country, which is in Maryland. It's number 6.
Well, in Frederick County, as across the country, listen, we're seeing the impact of illegal immigration crime, the drugs that are pouring into the country. But we talked about border security. We talked about detainers, the issues with criminal detainers. We talked about detention and bed space across the country for ICE. We also talked about what we were going to do as far as the strategy for border security.
Surely, and that's of interest to everybody. Sheriff, does it frustrate you and other men and women in your position that there are sanctuary counties, sanctuary cities, sanctuary states that do not cooperate with ICE?
It sure does. We all feel the impact of this all across the country. And when we have a county or a state that borders us that's a sanctuary county, we certainly feel the impact, because criminals know no borders.
Was it a good discussion yesterday?
A great discussion, a lot of good ideas, a lot of good proposals going forward, and I really believe this president has the back of law enforcement. We appreciate him, and he appreciates us.
So he's talking about a meeting that the president had he's kind of had a whirlwind week this week, President Trump has, where he's been traveling and going to rallies, and he's also been hosting a number of different individuals at the White House. And so this was no different. In fact, just an update on where the president is right now. He's in Fargo, North Dakota. And he's hosting a roundtable with supporters and delivering remarks at a reception for the Kramer Victory Fund, which is a joint fundraising committee authorized by and composed of Kramer for Senate, the North Dakota Republican Party, and National Republican Senatorial Committee. So we're seeing this, and it's a serious issue, and that's why the president had concerned individuals and law enforcement to come in and talk about this. And when they're talking about the impact of sanctuary counties, if it will, just think a county encompasses, it can encompass 100 cities, 100 towns, cities, and municipalities can be located in a county. You can have a major metropolitan area and then a bunch of other small areas. And what the sanctuary city designation does is it ties the hands of law enforcement. They can't cooperate with ICE. They can arrest someone because they're under suspicion of doing a crime. And if they didn't actually do that crime, but they're in the country illegally and they're a part of the criminal element, they get dished right back out to the street where they then go on to offend. And so if this wasn't the case, if it was a case of people getting arrested because of the color of their skin and then getting dragged into these horrible jails and imprisoned, and then they go back out and they're really just law-abiding members of the community and they've never done anything wrong, then why would we be talking about this? Why would sheriffs be sounding the alarm bell? They're doing that because something is very wrong. What happens is they're not just arresting people under suspicion of a crime because they were jaywalking or because they were 5 miles over the speed limit. They're actually targeting people who are involved in felonious assault, rape, kidnapping. They're suspected of being a part of the human trafficking issue that's going on across the country. And so these law enforcement officials, they know who the criminals are in their neighborhoods. New criminals quickly acquaint themselves with the old criminals and become known to the police. And then when they have them in custody and they can't keep them there for lack of evidence or chain of evidence, whatever the issue is, and they have to release them because they're in a sanctuary county, that means that ICE can't get there fast enough to detain these individuals and deport them before they rape, assault, murder, what have you. So if you're feeling really confident because you live in a place that doesn't have a sanctuary city, and you're thinking, we don't have that magnet for crime here because sanctuary city designation, sanctuary county designation, sanctuary state designation is a magnet for crime. MS-13 knows they can go and operate with impunity. They know that the police force there is overwhelmed, and they know that there are nincompoops in charge. They know that. So they go to where the water goes to the lowest place. They just flow into the places where they have the least resistance. I mean, think about the survey of criminals in prison. They were surveyed about what is the number one thing they think about when they're about to or in the commission of a crime. And the response overwhelmingly from convicted criminals who have nothing to lose, they have nothing, no agenda, they're not being paid, they're just being surveyed on what they're afraid of when they approach a crime scene, that they're going to make it a crime scene by doing a crime. Their number one fear is that the victim, their target, is armed. They're afraid to die. So all of these things point to criminals being pretty crafty about preserving their own life and going to places where they'll have the least resistance. So the designation of sanctuary city, it should be outlawed. It should be outlawed at the federal level. Any federal dollar that your county, city, state, that designation should put all of your federal funding at the entire state level in jeopardy. And I know what about Medicaid dollars? What about, what about SNAP? What about all of that? It should all be on the table. If you want to be a magnet for criminal activity and put your citizens at risk of being kidnapped and et cetera on down the line, then you should have your federal funding put on the line as well. That's how serious this issue is. And that's why the president had these people in to meet. So now I want to flip the script. It's Friday. Let's have some fun. Let's listen to Ted Cruz describe the successes that have been experienced over the past 18 months and how that going forward can only propel more success under certain conditions. It's number 2.
People care about substance. So when I'm home in Texas, what I hear from Texans is that they're thrilled with the tax cuts. The economic growth we're seeing is incredible. They have more money in their pockets for their families. Texans are thrilled that job-killing regulations have been pulled back. That means the energy sector is booming, oil and gas. That means farmers and ranchers find it much easier to make ends meet. Texans are thrilled that we came together and repealed the Obamacare individual mandate. And Texans are thrilled with the judges that have been confirmed, with Neil Gorsuch, and we're fixing to confirm Brett Kavanaugh. And, this week, we're starting today, day 4 of the Kavanaugh hearings. This will be the last day. And the Democrats have thrown every punch they got. They haven't managed to lay even a single glove on him. What they have had is an orchestrated effort with protesters screaming and hollering and disrupting the proceedings. I think the first day, 70 people were arrested. It was about every minute it seemed someone jumped up and began hollering. That, as I understand it, it's been reported, that was directly coordinated with the Democratic senators. I think that's what their extreme left-wing base demands. But I don't think that's what the American people want. The American people want justices on the Supreme Court who are going to be faithful to the Constitution, who are going to protect the Bill of Rights, protect our free speech, our religious liberty, our Second Amendment. And I think confirming Brett Kavanaugh continues with that ongoing commitment, and it's a major, major victory for the American people.
So you might have noticed, and he's dead on there, you might have noticed that there's President Obama's trending on Twitter, and Barack Obama is trending on Twitter. And that's because some group gave him an ethics award today. And when he took the podium to thank them for the honor of receiving the award, he decided to use it to, basically put his toe back in the political arena as a former president, issuing protocol that was set by George Bush that he would not criticize the current president because he knows how difficult the job is. Well, not Barack Obama. He's not going to abide by any precedent. So he's criticizing Donald Trump from his position of being a private citizen again. Now, what's so interesting about it is that he still hasn't learned anything. He hasn't learned that when he said you need a magic wand to fix the economy, he basically told all of us, all 320 million of us, that he never did know and will never know how an economy can be energized. Donald Trump seemed to understand how to energize it and came right on in and did so. And now Barack Obama wants to take credit for it. He has accused Donald Trump of capitalizing on resentment and urges Americans to engage in the midterm elections. Well, I can agree with him there, broken clock. Engage in the elections. Vote like your life depends on it. Render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's. And for goodness sakes, don't forget exactly how we got here. CNBC called the American economy a tremendous achievement for Trump, highlighting that during his time in office, the economy has achieved feats most experts thought impossible. And it wasn't just the experts. They were given that spirit of pessimism by Barack Obama. He's the one who told everybody it couldn't be done. You need a magic wand to go with your special unicorn that writes the op-eds for you. So during his time in office, the economy has achieved feats most experts thought impossible. GDP is growing at a 3% plus rate. The unemployment rate is near a 50-year low. Meanwhile, the stock market has jumped 27% amid a surge in corporate profits. So instead of Barack Obama taking the podium and saying, thanks for this ethics award, I actually don't know what ethics mean, but I appreciate your gift. Here's what Americans should be doing is getting into the market, because you can make some money right now. You can always make money in the American stock market. Even when it's on the downturn, that's a chance to buy low and hold until it rebounds. But right now, people are seeing their 401ks exploding. Everything is on the upswing, and this won't last forever. Remember, we as Christians are supposed to see opportunities and take advantage of them because we know the time is short. Boom times are short. Lean times are short. Nothing is a permanent condition. So instead of him trying to get credit for it or acting like he doesn't understand why it's happening or that it really is his doing, even though he said it couldn't be done, he should be advising Americans to take part in the economy and to be glad that it is where it is, because he's benefiting from it too. He didn't come into the White House worth $45 million, but he is now. He didn't come into the White House with the opportunity to be able to do deals with Netflix and other organizations like that, but he can now. So instead of him saying, I am just so blessed that I was elected president of this country, I am just such in a state of honor that I would be able to partake and be a part of this wonderful country. Instead of him doing that, he's sitting up throwing stones in a totally prefab glass house. Same old Barack Obama, different day. All right, when we get back, we're going to have more for you. Stay right there.
80% of the time, an abortion-minded mother who views an ultrasound or sonogram of her baby will choose life. Here's the story of Candace.
The sonogram sealed the deal for me. My baby was like this tiny little spectrum of hope. and I saw his heart beating on the screen. And knowing that there's life growing inside, I mean, that sonogram changed my life. I went from just Candace to Mom. Thank you to everybody that has given these gifts. You guys are giving more than money. You guys are giving love.
There are currently preborn centers which do not have an ultrasound machine. Would you sponsor a machine today? Dial pound 250 and say keyword baby. That's pound 250 and say baby. Or go to preborn.com. That's preborn.com. Your love could save a life.
Hi, I'm Crawford Loritz with a legacy moment. There's an old saying, home is where the heart is. It's true. The nature of my ministry causes me to be away from home fairly often. But while I'm away, home is constantly on my mind. In fact, for years I've traveled with pictures of my family, and I look at them from time to time. I call home frequently just to check in and stay in touch. My connection to home helps me keep my priorities in right order. In a sense, all of us as Christians are away from home. The moment we gave our hearts and lives to Jesus Christ, trusting Him as our Savior and Lord, we were giving a new address. That address is where we are going, and it's not where we are right now. As Christians, we are indeed away from home. Listen to Titus chapter 2, verses 11 through 13. For the grace of God has appeared, bringing salvation to all men, instructing us to deny ungodliness and worldly desires and to live sensibly, righteously, and godly in the present age, looking for the blessed hope and the appearing of our great God and Savior Jesus Christ. Notice the juxtaposition of the phrases in the present age and looking for the blessed hope. Right now, we are looking for our blessed hope. We're eagerly awaiting His appearing. In the New Testament, one of the primary motivations for godly living is our eternal destination, our ultimate destination, our home. We're to live in a state of readiness because He can come at any moment. I'm anticipating His coming. I'm prepared for His appearing. Well, here's what I want you to remember today. Home truly is where the heart is. Where's your heart? Let's ask God to help us to live like citizens of heaven.
More information about the ministry of Crawford Loritz can be found online at livingalegacy.org.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Welcome to the program. Thanks for being with us today. Happy Friday. It's about to be the weekend. I hope you have good plans. I'm excited to speak to our next guest, Mason Weaver. He's an author and political pundit, an expert really on conservative thought and politics. Mason, thank you for joining the show.
Always my pleasure. How you guys doing?
Doing good. It's a great day to be an American, great day to be looking at Friday and the economy, and the jobs numbers are just killing it. And I see because of that, Barack Obama has come out of his shell because he wants to take credit.
Yes, bowing down and smiling, and he's a comedian in training. I think the greatest indicator that the economy is doing greatly is the fact that even Colin Pumpernickel can get a job.
Well, you know what? And that's good. It's as it should be. I mean, well, you know, our own personal opinions aside, it is good to see Americans partaking of the economy, and especially groups that were left by the wayside by President Obama, the Black community, the Hispanic community, and anybody else who didn't fall into kind of an elite job position, educated at some Ivy League university teaching women's studies. Now regular folks can just go out and get jobs. You can get 2 jobs if you want them, and you can really make some headway in this economy.
2 jobs that pay. I heard someone online ask a question, name me one thing bad about the Obama economy. And since the Democrats always divide us up by our race and gender, let's do that then. Black unemployment, record high. Black home ownerships, low. Black home business starts were low under him. Mm-hmm. He devastated the black community. He attacked like he was a military force on the black community. He allowed Hispanic gangs to take over black gangs. He didn't go that far. So if you want to know what's wrong with the Obama economy, and also if you want to know what they have planned for you, They are promising to eliminate all the gains, all the regulations. They're going to raise your taxes. They're going to take more control of your life. They are campaigning against success. And America is awoke. And you cannot sneak up on a woke person. We're done with these clowns.
So speaking of sneaking up on somebody should sneak up on Cory Booker and tell him that he didn't break the Senate rules because the documents that he released, the 12 pages, had actually been approved and released the night before. And his office was notified, but he just refuses to, kind of back down. He keeps saying he needs to be kicked out because he did this when it was really nothing.
Well, he wants to fight. See, had he followed the rules and did things properly, we would not be talking about him right now. He needs the attention because he can't get any attention on his policies. He rather become the drama. I mean, he says this is the Spartacus moment. Does he know that Spartacus was killed? I think that he's just vying for attention because Kamala Harris was outdoing him and getting more attention. So he's like a little baby in the corner screaming, there's a monster under my bed. Come on, Mommy, there's a monster under my bed.
Well, and you brought up Kamala, and we'll get to her in just a second. But I just want to point out to folks because, first of all, a lot of our listeners may not even, it doesn't readily come to mind who Spartacus is. If you're a millennial and you're listening to the show, you might be thinking, Spartacus, is that like some kind of game? Like what is he talking about? This is a historical figure, a Thracian gladiator, along with Gallus, Crixus, and Gannicus, and Castus, and Oenomaus, was one of the escaped slave leaders in the Third Servile War. So the man was a slave. He was enslaved. There's actually a fantastic movie, an older movie, not the newer one. The older one is the one you want to watch. You want to watch a hero story, watch the movie about Spartacus and his life. He was a hero. He was an accomplished military leader, a former gladiator. As a slave, he was forced to fight as a gladiator, and he won. And he won all of the other slaves over to his side, so much so that when they wanted to execute him, they came for him, the Roman soldiers did, and he was like, before he could say his own name, they said, which of you is Spartacus? And all the thousands of different gladiators stood up as well, all of them enslaved, and said, I am Spartacus. And that was what Cory Booker was referring to, only Cory Booker is nothing like Spartacus. He would not be able to withstand the kind of abuse that Spartacus took or lead thousands of men by the sheer force of his will and his courage onto what amounted to a victory.
And notice that no one else stood up with him and said, I am Spartacus. I am Booker.
I am Cory Booker, too. He was probably hoping. So here's the thing. Now, look, we're talking about Kamala Harris. Okay, tell me, Mason, because you're a sage of the ages. Please tell me, how does she manage to get all of the attention that she gets when most of the stuff she says is also found to be lacking? That whole line of attack she leveled at Kavanaugh about him having had conversations about the Mueller investigation with someone at a specific law firm. Even Rachel Maddow, who is admittedly a hardcore leftist, asked her would she provide the proof that the conversation occurred that caused her to take that line of questioning? And Kamala Harris starts sputtering. Well, no, that's confidential, but it is a good source.
You asked me for proof?
Yeah, exactly.
No one asked you for proof.
What channel am I on? You don't need proof. It's me, Kamala. It's your girl.
So
yeah.
She had a brain freeze back to when Schumer lied about Romney and his taxes. Not paying taxes, and the media I think it was Schumer, and the media let him get away with it without challenging him on it. And after Romney lost the election, then he came out and basically said he made it up. And so Democrats believe they can make things up. They believe they can fabricate and create. That's why the New York Times feel comfortable putting out what they put out. They believe that no one's going to call them on their lies. And now she has a situation where we have other media. We have the Stacey Washington show. We can actually talk about things that they're not covering.
It's true, but so one of the video clips that I watched earlier today, someone was pointing out that Cory Booker and Kamala Harris are the most junior senators in the Senate Judiciary panel. They're the newest people on the scene, and so they sit next to each other. And so it's almost like a circus between the two of them where they're constantly trying to one-up each other. And so do you feel like Americans are watching this and they're buying it? I mean, even as, let's say you're a Democrat and you're watching this and you want Kamala Harris to be a rising star, or you want Cory Booker to be a rising star, is this the way for them to do it, even with the Democrats?
You have children. I have children. We all have seen that scene before, trying to get attention from mommy. That's what they're doing. And no one is buying it. Even their own team is not buying it. You mentioned Maddow, and everyone is wondering what kind of team are they going to put up for the election? Who is out there that's worthy to even be considered presidential? They mention presidential for Trump all the time. Please show me a Democratic potential candidate that is presidential.
Well, not those two, and
No.
and those two, in my opinion, they have this ability to like whip up media attention. But when you realize one of them's trending, you click through, you listen to the video, and you're like, what's going on? And it's always a nothing burger. Kamala Harris's, all of her questions were nothing burgers. In fact, there were some points where, and this is her MO, like I know she used to be a prosecutor in California, and yippee. But every time she questions someone, it doesn't matter who it is, she treats them like they are a murderous, rapist thug who has done something awful and they're guilty. They've been caught in the act. There's video. And all she has to do is get them to answer 2 or 3 questions, yes or no. And it's a, open and shut case. But she's talking to regular people who haven't committed any crime except wanting to be, a member of the Trump administration or Supreme Court or something like that.
That is a crime.
Every single time. I mean,
That's
she
a
just
heinous crime.
Well,
but see, she is trying to make the impression that I'm proper, I am right, I am special, and I am looking. She looked down her nose at people. She wants the audience. Don't forget, the audience is her jury. She's a prosecutor. The audience, the public watching TV, is her jury. They know nothing about the case, but they know that they're all sitting below her, looking up to her. She's on the table, on the dais, and she is authority. She's a U.S. senator, and she's assuming the role, I am right, you are wrong, and we're going to prove to the people. And the nutcases out there, mainly Democrats, they're assuming that that posture is correct. They're assuming that she's right, and Kavanaugh and everyone else before her is wrong.
Well,
Children.
Yeah. I was also kind of surprised because the first day, the way C-SPAN and all of the different, news organizations, even Fox News, I went on YouTube and I was watching the streams there because I couldn't pull C-SPAN up because apparently their bandwidth isn't strong enough to handle confirmation hearings. They were broadcasting it, but I couldn't get to their website. So I went on YouTube and I clicked through to a bunch of different sites just to see, like, what camera angle do they have? Because they're all in the same space, and usually they get, like, cordoned off. Well, the first day, we could hear the protesters, but we couldn't see them because of the way the cameras were trained to only be on whoever was speaking on the Judiciary panel or directly on Kavanaugh at his table. It was like a tight shot. Well, yesterday, when the people were erupting, the cameras were situated so that they could be moved, and I got to see there was actually a section of them. They were sitting in there, and they would just wait until it was a proper time, a Republican speaking, and then they would just go off. Just like epileptic seizure go off. Like it looked like it was involuntary, like they were out of control of their own bodies. And they would do that for 2 or 3 minutes before the Capitol Police, who were big burly guys. Like, I was expecting people to get thrown out of there like Hillary Clinton was thrown into the back of her bus when she passed out, but instead they were gently removed. What's that?
Well, it's for sure. They're trying to be fair. I don't understand how you be fair with your enemy. I don't understand how you be fair with someone trying to disrupt a proceeding. You do not have the right to disrupt. You have the right to speak, but not to disrupt government. So the proceedings is a sham. I wish that you don't have to be heard. In that hearing room, you do not have to be heard. It's hard to be heard. You got to put a microphone pretty close to that section, and you're correct. We have one section for the nutcases, and I believe they have microphones out there with them. I have been in that room. It is very large. It's very difficult, and each microphone is controlled. I would just turn the microphone off, and only the dais on the person speaking to be able to be heard.
Yeah. Absolutely. But they were, so there's, if anybody is, if maybe you're feeling low, and I always advise, go to the Word and say the scriptures aloud and prayer, and that lifts your spirits. It really does. Sing a song of joy to the Lord. But if you're looking for some just straight up giggles, if you just want to laugh, you don't have to be sad. You could just want to laugh. If you go to thedailycaller.com, they have a piece up. It's just a pictorial, and it's called Sad Kavanaugh. So you click through thinking you're going to see pictures of, Justice Kavanaugh looking sad, but instead of him, it's all of the different protesters. And let me tell you, this is an interesting looking bunch of people. Their dress, their faces, and they've caught them all while their mouths are wide open and they're screaming. Some of them are being carried out, literally arms, feet, everything's off the ground. They're being carried out like a little log. And some of them are literally kind of confronting the Capitol Police, who, God bless them, because you only know what it smelled like. It's just such a sad commentary right here. Because this is America. We believe in deodorant in this country. But you see them getting carried out and screaming. Their faces are red. They look sweaty. Even while they're being arrested, they're yelling. How do we not see one party utilize this footage to their advantage in the upcoming election?
Well, if the Republican Party want to win, they would use that. But the Republican Party leadership seems to be embarrassed by victory. They seem to be quite comfortable of just being in power and having their lunch and tea. They're not fighting back. Trump is fighting back. They have to drag the Republican leadership with them all the way. But you mentioned how they look and how they smell, that we all like deodorant. No, all of us do not like deodorant, dear. Liberals are sad because, think about the belief system to be a liberal. You got to believe that there'll be no more water in the future. There'll be no more Social Security in the future. People are trying to kill you with the food. They believe that we're going to use the oil is going to kill us. They are always sad. They only use makeup or shampoo because it's animal tested. They're just sad people. So that's why they're always so grumpy and so mean and so hateful, and they don't wash anything because it's bad for the environment.
Well, I'm going to recommend that we all understand that the Lord is all and he is in all. And we can forgive, but nostrils never forget. I'm just going to say that on a Friday. On a Friday afternoon on the show, it's hard to forget. Your nostrils will not, they're not going to be spared. So
liberals are going to be liberals. We're told to turn away from them. Jeremiah, 2 Timothy 3 tells us these people are going to be here. And we're not told to convince or convert. We're told to turn away from them. Turn away. So why are we trying to spend our time? You could never convince a liberal of anything. But once they change their heart, if they come to you and say, can you help me with this conservative thing? Can you show me what? Then you help them. But to talk to a liberal is like trying to convince a fish about the desert. They have no comprehension.
And I'm going to give you guys that scripture that he just quoted. It's 2 Timothy 3, but realize this, that in the last days, difficult times will come, for men will be lovers of self, lovers of money, boastful, arrogant, revilers, disobedient to parents, ungrateful, unholy, unloving, irreconcilable, malicious gossips, without self-control, brutal, haters of good, treacherous, reckless, conceited, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, holding to a form of godliness, although they have denied its power. Avoid such men as these. That's the scripture he read. And don't shoot the messenger. That's straight out of the Word of God. 2 Timothy chapter 3.
And everyone listening knows exactly who that modern day description is for. Everyone.
True
Be
enough.
still if you want to. Pretend if you want to. That is a direct description of what we're talking about and who we're talking about. And it says at the end, from them, turn away. Stop giving them attention, folks.
We got to do better. But on a Friday, I think we did our best. We talked to Mason Weaver. We got that wisdom. Thank you, sir. Talk to you next week. All right?
Stay right or be left. It turns a long time to be wrong.
All right. Have a great weekend.
Bye-bye.
So we have more show for you. We're going to take calls in the next segment. And we're also going to listen to Rand Paul. Senator Rand Paul had an interesting, it's like a quick hot take. They asked him, how do you find this person who wrote this op-ed? And he had the very best answer. And I'm also going to show you how the answer that he gave, people will say, well, if Trump does that, that's illegal. But Obama did it first, so it's okay. Trump can do it too. So we'll talk about that and take your calls at 866-963-2037 right after this.
I just thank God for the Holy Ghost. If you will let him, he really will teach you all things. Have you ever made an excuse to someone why you were unable to do something or why you couldn't attend a certain event instead of just being honest and telling them you just were not interested? I think many of us have. Well, that's lying. Proverbs chapter 12 verse 17 says, an honest witness tells the truth. A false witness tells lies. Proverbs chapter 11 verse 1 in one translation says, dishonesty in business disgusts the eternal. It disgusts God. But fair dealing delights him. False witness utters lies. Be faithful and consistent with being honest with others. Stop with the excuses and be truthful. There is freedom when our integrity and character reflects our Savior Jesus Christ. What seems little to us are big to him. With a heart for the urban family, I'm today's urban woman, Victory McIntosh. Connect with us more at urbanfamilytalk.com.
Here's Steve Tiber.
8 Days of Hope started after Hurricane Katrina, helping people in Bay St. Louis, Waveland, Mississippi, rebuild their homes back in 2005. Since then, this faith-based ministry has gone nationwide, and we've helped out dozens of cities, dozens of areas of the country after hurricanes, tornadoes, flooding, or even snowstorms. And now you get a chance to be a difference maker. 8 Days of Hope 16. You can be the hands and feet of Jesus down in Houston from October 13th to October 20th. You can come for as little as 3 days or stay all 8 days. We provide the food and lodging. We're looking for skilled professional and people like me who are less skilled and just want to give back. For more information, go to our website, 8daysofhope.com. Click on the event, 8 Days of Hope 16. Read the FAQs and learn more about how you can make a difference with 8 Days of Hope.
Learn more and sign up to be a part of 8 Days of Hope 16 in Houston, Texas at 8daysofhope.com. That's 8daysofhope.com.
Media Minute with Howard Kurtz.
New Yorker editor David Remnick had a pretty provocative idea. Invite Steve Bannon to the annual New Yorker Festival as one of the featured guests. He says, look, it'll be an interview. I'll engage him and we'll test his views. And there was an eruption, an explosion online. New Yorker readers very unhappy about this. And some of the featured Hollywood guests that probably put people in the seats at these events said, I'm out. Judd Apatow, the producer, Jim Carrey, the comedian and actor, said, I will not appear at the festival if Steve Bannon does. So what happened? Remnick caved. He caved to the pressure. He disinvited Bannon. His explanation, well, you know, a lot of the anger was aimed at me, and some members of my staff reached out to say they objected to the invitation. I don't want well-meaning readers and staff members to think I've ignored their concerns. And so he just decided to get rid of Bannon. Bannon now calling him gutless. He wanted to appear with what he said was one of the most fearless journalists of his generation. That won't happen. There's a pattern here of caving under pressure on these free speech matters. With your Media Minute, Howie Kurtz, Fox News.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
I think if you have a security clearance in the White House, I think it would be acceptable to use a lie detector test and ask people whether or not they're talking to the media against the policy of the White House.
Yeah, and just don't be perplexed, y'all. Welcome back to the show. No need to be perplexed, because guess what? Barack Obama did that. He actually prosecuted staff leakers, gave lie detector tests, and some people said he was kind of paranoid about it. Now, I don't think it's paranoia. If you have leaks going on in your administration, it doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or Republican. If you have people who are working for you and earning those big bucks and carrying those prestigious badges around, I've been to the White House enough to know those badges carry a lot of power. When those porters that work at the White House, so they have these porters, right? And the porters, they have a lot of power too. They're dressed up. So if you attend a function there's two interactions you can have with these people. They're the Capitol Police and the security that are around the White House, and they have the ultimate power. They can just tell you to leave. They can tell you to get out. But they can also tell you to remove yourself from a certain space. If you go into a room that room is about to be occupied by someone important like the president, they'll usher you out. And they don't ask you. They just say, I need you to step this way. Please step this way. They say it really pleasantly. And by the time you realize what's happening, you're already outside that room and the door's shut and there's somebody standing in front of it and you can't get back in. You can only get in if you have some kind of a pass. And there's like a system. They know who belongs where, and that's how you get going to wherever you're going. And so when I say these White House hard pass holders have an amazing amount of, it's prestigious, it's powerful, it is special to get tapped to work for the White House. it is special to continue to hold that position. It's special to be able to walk up to one of the gates that surround the White House and step up to that person at that gate and show them your hard pass. And instead of them vetting you and asking for your driver's license and putting your name in the computer to see if you're on the list for the day, for that hour, for that very specific time, as they do with people like me, when I'm given a pass, it's not a hard pass at all. I show my driver's license. They check my name. They ask me who I'm there to see. They check the list for that staffer. That staffer's list has to have my name, and my name has to be the same on my driver's license as it is in the computer. If they leave an initial off or misspell my name, I'm not getting in. Meanwhile, hard pass holders are just strolling on by because that is their right, because they hold hard passes. They have access. So you're walking around in this rarefied elite world. You're a White House staffer, senior level staffer at that. You're one of 1,000 or so people who can walk in and out of the White House because that's your job, because you have a hard pass for the Eisenhower Executive Office Complex as well as the White House. You have access to the president. This person claims to have taken papers off of the president's desk, which I don't believe for 1 second. And this is how they repay that honor. There's also the issue of this individual stepping outside of what the voters have said. This isn't a country of staff people running the country. Staffers don't run this country. The voters do. And we elect representatives for ourselves that go forward and put forward policies that go along with what they promised when they were running. So President Trump, elected. White House staffer, not elected. So I sincerely hope the president moves forward with these people have to be revetted. And individuals who are under suspicion of being the ones who wrote this piece have to go through the lie detector process. And anybody else, like he said in one of the gaggles, so the president has been traveling and he's been on Air Force One, up and down, up and down. And as he's doing that, the press is, with him, and they sometimes will have this informal gaggle where he comes back, and sometimes it's off the record and sometimes it's on. And during one of the gaggles, he said, this is not okay for people to say that they're doing, taking things off of my desk. That never happened. He also said that he's not, he wants the person investigated and prosecuted, and that the Department of Justice is doing just that. That he wants the New York Times to release the name, and that he doesn't want them to do this again because it undermines the authority of not just the president and the executive branch, but it undermines the authority of voters who elected Donald Trump and put him there. And here's the other thing. If you think for 5 seconds that this is only something that happens to someone who's awful and horrible like Donald Trump, this could never happen to anyone else. He deserves this because of who he is and what he said about immigrants or white supremacists or whatever your beef is. Just wait until the worm turns. It will be the turn of the other party that is condoning this to have someone working on their staff who is a plant and doesn't really want to be there or doesn't want the success of the policies that they're putting forward. And that person will leak. And that person will write anonymous op-eds. And maybe the New York Times will publish it, but they can go to Breitbart or anybody else and get it published. They can put it up on their own blogs. They can post it to Scribd. Anyone with a bone to pick in the next administration, if it happens to be run by the opposing party, they now have the blueprint. How do you undermine the presidency of a party that you don't like? How do you undermine the will of the American people? By just writing anonymous op-eds and getting what used to be upstanding, fine media organizations that have completely lost their way. Just get one of them to publish it. So this is something that, sure, we're dealing with it, we're seeing, but it has to be brought to a conclusion. And that's why I thought it was so important that Rand Paul said, that anyone who's working in this position in the White House, they're really the lie detector thing. Like, you can say, I don't want to take it, and then they just let you go. So it's not really optional. It's not like you can say, I don't think I want to take a lie detector. Yeah, you're going to take one. If he says everybody on this wing is going to take this lie detector test, it's going to be your turn and you're going to take it. And that's going to be at the end of it. So, you got a security clearance. You're in the White House. You're working there. You should be willing to submit unless you're the actual writer of the op-ed. So I think Rand Paul's right. I think it's a good thing for the president to do, to execute that authority and to make sure that people who might be considering doing something like this, because the New York Times has not ruled out, the editor who published this anonymous op-ed has not ruled out publishing more of them. Imagine the mayhem. Every time something happens that the opposing party doesn't like, this anonymous op-ed writer just, they can write whatever they want. How do you vet that? Without the name, how do you vet it? Because the people in the White House, it's like responding to a ghost. So it's the wrong thing for us to have happening here. And I can't believe anyone who has an iota of integrity within them would ever say, yeah, this is right, it's what needs to be done. Everyone, I mean, even we're going to have some audio next hour of Megyn Kelly. Even Megyn Kelly feels that this is an absolute ridiculous prospect. And she's hardly a fan of the president. I mean, come on. She's hardly doesn't even begin to understand it. This woman dislikes President Trump. But it's not about the feelings, now is it? So remember this, we have an example of how this, what this looks like. When Harry Reid was in charge of the Senate, he eliminated the filibuster rule because they wanted to ram through a bunch of really inappropriate activist judges. And when they couldn't get Republicans to come across the aisle and vote with them, they eliminated the filibuster and the nuclear option. And when they did so, Mitch McConnell said, this will come back to haunt you because we don't support eliminating this because it is something that we have had as a part of the Senate rules. And we've agreed to it in a bipartisan fashion, every administration, regardless of party, up until this point. But they did it anyway. And now you have Democrats, just check freebeacon.com. You have Democrats all over the television talking about, well, I don't like this. I don't like not being able to filibuster. I don't like not having the ability to block nominees that I don't agree with. Well, you're not in the majority. And so you don't get to do that. And so they may very well be in the majority again and, bully for them. But right now, as you heard Dr. Land say on the show yesterday, we're talking about 1/8 of all the judges have now been replaced with conservative textualists. I mean, praise God. That's fantastic because that means the law is going to be the same for you and me and any high and mighty person and anyone that's down low. And remember, no one's actually legitimately down low. In God's sight, we are all the same. It's either sinner or saved, but all the same level. There are no higher ups and lower downs with God. And so we want that kind of blind justice in this country. We want to return to the rule of law because it's not fair when a lowly soldier gets prosecuted for taking pictures in a submarine, but a high and mighty former first lady gets to walk free and wear those house suits all over the place and continue to comment on politics while she destroyed emails and allowed national security secrets to be accessed by the Chinese and other foreign operators. That's not fair. Those pictures didn't hurt anybody. Should he have been prosecuted? Well, I mean, that's up to his commanding officer. Should he have been jailed for that? Absolutely not. Should Hillary be walking around free without being prosecuted? No. Not in a country where justice is blind and the rule of law, it's a nation of laws and not men. And that's what the founders were talking about. When we get to a place where it's a nation of men, then that means the elites, the powerful, the well-connected, they can operate with impunity. And the little peons will keep bumping up against the law because there's so much of it. So I just thought that was pretty fascinating that Rand Paul had that. It was a great idea. Fantastic idea. And I also love that Mason Weaver last segment dropped that 2 Timothy 3. We sometimes forget about that scripture. Isn't it something that in the Bible, God's word calls out this behavior of men way back when the Bible was written, and we see it happening right here today. And that's because this is the behavior of man. It's not because this is unique behavior to our time. It's because it's the behavior of man, and that wherever there are men, you're going to have people operating within this. And I want to give the remainder of that chapter 3 because it's you kind of get the rough stuff in that first verses, chapter 3, 1 through 9. But in verse 10, the Bible says in 2 Timothy 3, "Now you followed my teaching, conduct, purpose, faith, patience, love, perseverance, persecutions, and sufferings, such as happened to me at Antioch, at Iconium, and at Lystra. What persecutions I endured, and out of them all the Lord rescued me. Indeed, all who desire to live godly in Christ Jesus will be persecuted. But evil men and impostors will proceed from bad to worse, deceiving and being deceived. You, however, continue in the things you have learned and become convinced of, knowing from whom you have learned them, and that from childhood you have known the sacred things which are able to give you wisdom that lead to salvation through faith, which is in Christ Jesus. All Scripture is inspired by God and profitable for teaching, for reproof, for correction, for training in righteousness, so that the man of God may be adequate and equipped for every good work." And so in all these things, whether we're talking about politics or we're going to get into some conversations about the stonewalling that we saw from Cory Booker's office, we're going to have Richard Lim, creator of This American President podcast, come on and talk about George Washington's farewell address and what it says about foreign policy and political parties and religion. We're going to listen to that little bit of audio from Megyn Kelly. But in the end, we know God's word is true. It's profitable to us. It's health to our bones. It's life to us. And it gives us wisdom. It sharpens our minds. And it reproves us. It helps us to know when we're right or left. It is our guiding lodestar. It keeps us on the right path. And it keeps us from being incorrect. And when we are incorrect, we know which way we have to get back to be right. And so that means we have to study it so that we know what it says. We have to study it so that our minds can be sharpened, so that we are not easily deceived. That is something that I really think we see a lot of right now, is people who are easily deceived because they don't have wisdom, because they haven't cracked open their word. They haven't read enough to know enough to be able to discern when people are lying to them. And then what happens is you see the kind of anger that we saw at that hearing. The Kavanaugh hearings have been filled with angry people acting out like toddlers. And no insult to the toddlers with their juicy thighs and their juicy little faces and their sweet little demeanors and their wonderful little Smurfy voices. No insult to them. But toddlers can throw a tantrum. And that's what we saw from these adults, tantruming because in their deception, they don't know how to deal with the reality and the truth that is smacking them in the face, which is Kavanaugh is not just eminently qualified, but he deserves a place on the Supreme Court because he might anger conservatives. He might anger Republicans with some of his rulings, but that is not going to temper him in any way. He will not be driven by politics or by what he feels someone in power wants. He's going to evaluate and be a true referee of the law. Instead of making law and instead of creating law, he's going to be interpreting the Constitution as it is written, abiding by that, because that is the job of a Supreme Court justice. So that knowledge in and of itself was enough to send a whole bunch of people off to loony land because they've been deceived. They can't see the truth. They can't discern the truth. The truth is an anathema to them because they are living in deception and completely ruled by their feelings and their emotions. It's ugly to watch. We can't be those people. That's why we have to read our word. When we get back with Hour 2, we're going to have more Stacey on the Right for you. Stay tuned for important messages from Fox News and onenewsnow.com.
Family Talk.
I'm Will Addison, Director of Urban Family Talk. Do you believe that we are living in the last days? In the culture we live in today, and dare I say even in our church culture, we are guilty of not looking towards Christ's return, but are in fact bogged down with the cares of this world. Do you find yourself more concerned about this world than you are about the world to come? Be encouraged to live as if Christ is coming back today. Stay connected at urbanfamilytalk.com.
Truth. Wisdom. Empowerment. Urban Family Talk, a ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh. Senators were back for a final hearing day today, along with more than 24 witnesses on both sides of the nomination of Judge Brett Kavanaugh to the U.S. Supreme Court. Rachel Sutherland reports.
Judge Kavanaugh has finished his testimony and is not expected to appear at today's proceedings. Instead, people are talking about him and his qualifications before the Senate Judiciary Committee. The witnesses were invited by both Democrats and Republicans. Among those invited by the minority on the committee is John Dean, former Nixon staffer who worked during the Watergate scandal. Luke McLeod, who was a clerk for Judge Kavanaugh, says he's a liberal but respects his former boss greatly. In Washington, Rachel Sutherland, Fox News.
Police in Utah say a man arrested last month had plans to try and kill the president.
Court records unsealed this week show 56-year-old William Scott Wheeler was stopped August 25th, 120 miles southeast of Salt Lake City, for concealing his headlights with a blanket. Police say he appeared to be drunk and in possession of a shotgun, 2 pistols, a revolver, 2 long guns, and ammunition. Wheeler allegedly telling officers he suspected the Secret Service was after him after he supposedly sent messages to the White House that he planned to kill the president. He faces weapons and other charges and was ordered detained this week. Jeff Manasso, Fox News.
A Massachusetts-based pro-family activist is pleased with the showing of a conservative primary challenger to Massachusetts' incumbent Republican governor. Chad Groening has more.
Scott Lively wasn't supposed to beat Charlie Baker, and he didn't. But the pastor and the author ended up with 36% of the vote in Tuesday's Republican gubernatorial primary, and some analysts believe that vote largely came from Trump supporters. Brian Kamaker is president of Mass Resistance.
The odds against him were so unbelievably high. First of all, Baker has a war chest of $8 million, and Scott had just, some number of thousands of dollars, not much. And Baker blanketed the state with TV ads and mailing, and every time you turned on the TV, there he was. The party wouldn't let Scott use any of their offices around the state or any of their materials, even though they were supposed to because he was a candidate.
So Kamaker says Lively getting 36% of the vote was quite an accomplishment.
I think that we could consider that a big victory, and I think that the establishment considers it a big embarrassment. A guy with no resources at all could just show up and get 36% against an incumbent governor.
And Kamaker believes Baker, who he says is more like a liberal Democrat than a Republican, will defeat Democratic nominee Jay Gonzalez in November. I'm Chad Groening.
New Mexico will honor aborted babies used by researchers and medical students at the University of New Mexico for experiments. Charlie Butch reports.
The medical board and late-term abortion clinic Southwestern Women's Options were named in a congressional probe for possible wrongdoing for harvesting the body parts and handing them over to the facility. As a result of the scandal, the university stopped the research program. Tara Schaefer of Abortion Free New Mexico then wrote a letter to University of New Mexico Chancellor for Health Sciences Paul Roth asking him to turn over 72 aborted babies for proper burial. Schaefer tells AFN Roth responded with a refusal.
We feel like they don't want to hand them over because they don't want to sort of make a confession of what it is that they've been doing all these years by harvesting actual human beings and using them for experimental research.
The response from the school was disappointing, but a service for the children will be held at Sandia Memorial Garden in Albuquerque, a site where some abortive mothers have placed plaques honoring their child during the National Day of Remembrance for Aborted Children. Schaefer says, as humans, the babies deserve dignity and respect.
So we're going to have a memorial service to remember them and all the babies that have been killed by abortion since 1973 this Saturday, September 8th from 10 to 11 a.m.
That's Mountain Time. I'm Charlie Butts.
The Dow is down 123 points at 25,872. American Family News is online at onenewsnow.com. I'm Rusty Pugh.
I'm Will Addison, Director of Urban Family Talk. We desire to be a movement of time tellers. In 1 Chronicles 12:32 it says, the sons of Issachar were men who had understanding of the time, to know what Israel ought to do. In these perilous times, God is raising up a people of discernment who will see, pray, and act. We sound the alarm as watchmen. We cry aloud that God's people may be activated for his service. Join the movement at urbanfamilytalk.com.
She's sharp, pointed, and insightful. This is Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
By the time I left office, household income was near its all-time high, and the uninsured rate had hit an all-time low, and wages were rising, and poverty rates were falling. I mention all this just so when you hear how great the economy is doing right now, let's just remember when this recovery started.
And now, Stacy Washington.
I remember when it started. November of 2016. That's when the recovery started. And I would be just as happy if it had been a recovery that occurred under President Obama. You know why? Because I'm just interested in people getting back to work. I'm interested in people not having the generational poverty that plagues some segments of our society. So it's not really about who's bringing the recovery, but you got to give credit where credit is due. Just please, somebody tell me that they go to work and they do their job well, and then when someone else comes and takes credit for it, you don't at least say, well, what I was there too. I think you're talking about my project. No offense, but that's my job. I did that. Most of us would at least pipe up a little bit and say, you helped, but I was there. So welcome back to the show. We have Richard Lamb, creator of This American President podcast. He'll be with us next segment. Right now, I want to hear a little bit of commentary about this Harrison Booker dichotomy. And I think what's interesting is we're going to see more of it, but it was the hearing that let us actually view the two of them juxtaposed against one another, right next to each other. And it's an almost frantic thing that Cory Booker is doing. And first of all, I don't guess anybody told them that replicating the success of Barack Obama in him being a one-term junior senator with virtually no political background other than being a community organizer and activist, that an election that propels someone like that to the forefront, that's not going to be easy to replicate. Just being black and being in the Senate and having a really catty attitude isn't going to cut it anymore. Millions of Americans who took that chance and voted for Barack Obama were disappointed greatly. And now Cory Booker and Kamala Harris think, well, but we're black and we also can do whatever we want to do. And they can run for president, but it doesn't mean they're going to be able to replicate. First of all, Barack Obama had a secret weapon at his disposal, which was the two young daughters and a wife who was politically astute. Oh, she made some flubs, but she knew how to carry the parts of their constituency that she needed to carry in order to support her husband into the presidency. Kamala Harris, she doesn't have that. And Cory Booker is single and also not mainstream. So what do we see? The two of them basically jockeying and fighting each other over crumbs. It's like they both are fighting over a single grain of rice. It's comical to watch, but it's also perplexing because do you know you're fighting over a grain of rice? They don't have the biggest of chances. Elizabeth Warren has said definitively that she's not running. And it's interesting because by all intents and purposes, she would be the one that everyone would think they'd hand the baton over to. I've heard some rumors, and we've even interviewed people here on the show about Hillary Clinton doing her thing again. I don't see it, but she's going to keep the speculation up, obviously, because it maintains her power base. So here is this commentary about Harrison Booker using the hearing to one-up each other for 2020. It's number 5.
And I think you're now seeing the two people that are the most talked about likely 2020 presidential contenders on the Democratic side of this panel are Cory Booker and Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris, in questioning Kavanaugh late last night, had a moment that went viral, and she got a lot of attention for it in the overnight hours and this morning about questioning him about any comments he had with a lawyer or a member of a law firm about the Mueller investigation, indicating she knows there's something there. And then her potential 2020 rival, Cory Booker, who sits next to her on the panel, comes out swinging this morning saying, I'm breaking Senate rules. This is my only chance to have a Spartacus moment, and I'm willing to get kicked out of the Senate over this. So I think you also have some one-upsmanship going on among the Democrats as well.
Yeah, but it's not working because people, so in order to really execute one-upsmanship, you have to have something that is legitimate that you can show that's like, yeah, she's had some pretty pointed questioning, but I've actually flouted the Senate rules by releasing confidential documents in an effort to alert the American people to something really, really important. Not only were the documents no longer confidential, but they only show that Kavanaugh is not only not a racist, but that he worked on behalf of aggrieved parties who had experienced, he basically said, I don't want anyone to experience racial profiling. Now, I actually disagree with that. And so here we are. I'm in the unique spot of getting to disagree with Judge Kavanaugh. He felt after 9/11 that racial profiling would be wrong. I absolutely take the opposite view. Racial profiling is one of the mechanisms by which Israelis and the Israeli Defense Forces and all of the people that protect their airports and their borders and everything, they use racial profiling as well as other indicators to single out people who might be planning to commit terror. They do that. That's what they use. So the idea that we can't use that, I totally disagree with Judge Kavanaugh on that. But Cory Booker's intent in releasing that information was not to highlight that he didn't want to use racial profiling. He thought he could use that as a way to show that he did want to use it. And it didn't work. I mean, it did not work. So, it was ridiculous. So then you have Cory Booker's office stonewalling on if he knowingly lied about the Kavanaugh docs classification status. So once it was realized by people in the media, and Shannon Bream was one of the first people to send out a tweet and say, wait a second, we've just called. This information is not classified anymore. You didn't actually release anything that was classified. Her office, her staff for her television show on Fox reached out to Cory Booker's staff, his office in the Senate, and said, are you guys aware that your member is saying that he's released something that's confidential when in reality these items were made available last night according to the process? Like it was just a normal, someone asked for them and so they were declassified and now they're available. They've been available since last night. His release this morning is of non-classified information. It's not, there's no rule that's been broken. And so his office stonewalled. Instead of just admitting, oh, so it wasn't classified after all, well, you win some, you lose some. No, they had to keep up the appearances. It's number 4.
This morning when he took to the dais and said, I'm going to release these at the very risk of being expelled from the Senate, it got a lot of folks' attention. He was cautioned by Senator Cornyn and others on the committee about doing that. And not long after that, he did release these documents. So I reached out to his office to say, were these part of the documents he was negotiating with Senator Lee about? Were these documents released, or is he really making a point by violating Senate rules or policy by releasing them? They wouldn't get back to me. Well, then Senate committee staffers here for the Judiciary Committee told us, a number of us reporters, that they said these had been cleared by 4 a.m. and there were a number of senators who had been notified, including Senator Booker. So then that raises the question about his speech here about 10 a.m. this morning, the release of the documents about 11 a.m. So I again went back to his staff and said, we need to know about the timing of when he knew these documents were already okay for public release. They wouldn't get back to us about specific timing, but here is what Bill Burke said. He is the man who is going through the presidential privilege with respect to President Bush 43. He said, we cleared the documents last night shortly after Senator Booker's staff asked us to. We were surprised to learn about Senator Booker's histrionics this morning because we'd already told him he could use the documents publicly. In fact, we have said yes to every request made by the Senate Democrats to make documents public.
So, yeah, it was nothing. It was nothing. I'm sorry. So, I'm not sorry. I'm not sorry that it was nothing. I just think it's unfortunate that his office was caught up in this. It was basically not just a sham, but an embarrassing display that was brought on by his grandstanding and his desire for attention. And we've all been there. So, it's not like this is something that only he's done, but come on, he's got to be held accountable for that. So moving into some news about this, because the Kaepernick story with Nike, it has legs. There's so much more that's being exposed. So different businesses are now shying away from utilizing Nike. And one of them, this is just fascinating. is a Missouri college that says that they're not going to use Nike athletic gear anymore. They're removing college clothing that sports the Nike emblem after the announcement that Kaepernick was going to do the Just Do It campaign. College of the Ozarks president Jerry Davis issued a statement on Wednesday saying that if Nike is ashamed of America, we are ashamed of them. And so College of the Ozarks is nicknamed Hard Work U. It's in the Ozarks part of Missouri, so way down south. And we've been there before. We actually took a tour of the college when our daughter was considering where to go. It's one of the only colleges in the country that is completely tuition free because every part of the university is run by the students. So when you go there, whatever you're getting your degree in, that's the area of the campus that you also are required to work a certain number of hours while you're there going to school. And when you leave, now you pay room and board, but you don't pay actual tuition. Those costs are covered by their endowment and by also the fact that they have basically zero operating costs when it comes to the functional portion of the university. And it's conservative in nature. There's pictures of Colin Powell and Ben Carson and, George Bush on the walls. They've given keynote addresses and spoken at commencement ceremonies there. And so we visited. It's an amazing university. It's a beautiful campus, and it's in a really nice part of the Ozarks where you have all these beautiful vistas down the sides of mountains and the river and all of that. And so they're basically saying, you know what, we're not going to do that. We're not going to have this kind of athletic wear on our students for their athletic events after this announcement. So he says, in their new ad campaign, we believe Nike executives are promoting an attitude of division and disrespect towards America. And that's from the head of their school, Mr. Davis. The private Christian college participates in the National Association of Intercollegiate Athletics and has hosted the National Men's Basketball Tournament for 18 years. The college said that it would walk away from the games if the opposing team disrespected the American flag or national anthem by kneeling, sitting, or turning their backs. And he said that back in 2017. The college holds a commemoration on September 11th, reading the Constitution on September 17th for Constitution Day, holds a Veterans Day service, and hosts an annual Independence Day celebration to emphasize American patriotism and heritage. And that's according to their website. Neither Nike nor the College of Ozarks responded to Daily Caller News Foundation requests for comment. I believe he's kind of outlined it pretty clearly. Nike has not really been very verbal about where they're going at this point. They've just lost a lot of their reputational value, and they've also really had a tough go when it comes to their stock price. So August jobs report. This is Friday. This is when we get to learn about the jobs report, and this is so awesome. The numbers. You've got the United States creating 201,000 new jobs in August, keeping the unemployment rate at an 18-year low and generating the fastest increase in worker pay since the end of the Great Recession. Now, remember, it wasn't even a month ago that we had a guest, a writer, an economics writer on, and she talked about wages being stagnant. Well, that's no longer the case. The unemployment rate actually was unchanged at 3.9%. I saw another site that said it actually dropped a 1/10 of a percentage point to 3.8, but it's neither here nor there. Below 4, fantastic. The increase in hiring in August was another solid gain that reflects broad strength in an economy that accelerated in the spring and showed little sign of slowing down toward the end of the summer. And the biggest news in the August employment report was the increase in pay, a sharp increase. Now, remember, we were told that couldn't happen. It's not going to happen. And if it does, it's going to go back down. Well, that's not true. The average wage paid to an American worker rose by 10 cents to $27.16 an hour, which is why we don't have to worry about the minimum wage, because you don't stay there if you're a good employee. What's more, the yearly rate of pay increases climbed to 2.9% from 2.7%, marking the highest level since June of 2009. It's good news, people. Good News Friday. That's what's going on right now. So we're going to be back with Richard Lim after these messages.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tim Wildman, president of American Family Association and American Family Radio. You know, the very first day in Israel, when we're staying in Jerusalem, we go to the Mount of Olives. And it's there at the Mount of Olives we look out over the old city of Jerusalem. It's a spectacular sight. You've seen it in pictures before, but it's another thing to actually be there as we walk down from the Mount of Olives to the Garden of Gethsemane, and we pray there. It's going to be a wonderful time with brothers and sisters from around the country visiting the Holy Land, the land of Jesus. If you want information on this March 14th through the 22nd tour, just call us and we'll send you a brochure. Call 1-800-FAMILIES, F-A-M-I-L-I-E-S, option 5, and leave us your name and your address and we'll mail you a brochure. Or if you want to simply go online at twholyland.com, everything's there. twholyland.com.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
You know, many writers have talked about the fact that America seems to be in the midst of what is called the Civil War of Values. Victor Davis Hanson provides an in-depth analysis of the origins of our second Civil War. Globalization, he says, had an unfortunate effect of undermining national unity. While some became billionaires in high-tech and finance, most other Americans lost out. To make matters worse, the elites blamed the losers, the clingers, and the deplorables for driving industries out of the country because they were too racist or xenophobic to get with the globalist agenda. High-tech, he also argues, had a way of disguising poverty. Suddenly, the lower middle class and the poor had in their palms the telecommunications power of the Pentagon of the 1970s, the computing power of IBM in the 1980s, and the entertainment diversity of the rich in the 1990s. At the same time, the new normal were two parents at work, renting instead of buying, and an 8-year car loan instead of a 3-year car loan. Higher education helped split the country in two, but not only were universities becoming more left-wing, but they were also becoming far more intolerant than they were in the radical 1960s. Illegal immigration changed America in significant ways. Progressives wanted a new demographic to vote for leftist politicians, while conservatives wanted a pool of cheap, unskilled labor. These waves of immigrants changed the Electoral College map and ushered in tribalism and calls for more diversity. Victor Davis Hanson has some suggestions about what might bring the United States together. One solution he mentions is a religious and spiritual reawakening. Yes, there are political and economic solutions, but perhaps the most important is the need for revival. That may be the most important antidote to a country headed for a second civil war. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kirby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
You can download episodes of Stacy on the Right from the podcast page on AFR.net or UrbanFamilyTalk.com. Now, back to the show on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Welcome back to the program. Thank you so much for being here today. Happy Friday to you. I'm excited because I love speaking with our next guest, total expert, and also just purveyor of all of the most uncommonly fascinating facts about our American presidents. It's Richard Lim, creator of the This American President podcast. He's a former White House political appointee in the Bush administration. He's an author and a national security commentator. Richard, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. I got to say, those unemployment numbers and the economy numbers, they're just, those are, that lifts my spirits. I like that. I like the sound of that.
Yeah, a lot of people think that the best way to solve social ills is to have the government step in and do everything. But, when you have a thriving economy, opportunity expands, and that's what history shows us over and over.
True enough. And I think one of the things that we discount or we don't talk about enough is that it's not this loud change. What happens is people start working that weren't working before, and then they have income, and then that income gets poured back into the economy because they're buying things they couldn't buy before. And that changes their life and it improves their lives. And so instead of complaining or protesting or something like that, they're out saving for an educational goal or saving for a vacation or taking a vacation or spending money on things that their family needs, and they're happy. And so we don't get to the same, like the activists are the ones who are upset about this, but they're not the ones who are being helped. It's this weird, like, people who are happy aren't out complaining, and so we're not hearing from them, but they're happier because they're working.
Right, absolutely. And, I mean, people said the same thing when President Reagan came into office, and people assumed that, the sky was going to fall because of this or that, or, because of deregulation and all those kind of things. But that didn't happen, and America was definitely better off for it.
Absolutely. So let's dig into this George Washington farewell address. So first of all, farewell from his time as president?
Right. Yeah, so, it's a document that has always fascinated me because essentially here's the founder of the country. He's leaving the stage. This is the last thing he's ever going to say to the American people. He's been in charge of the country, not just as the president, but also during the 8 years of the war. So if you think about it, he was the most important figure on the world stand in an American national stage longer than anyone, longer than Franklin Roosevelt. And here he is basically giving his parting words. And it's such a shame that we don't even listen to it anymore. We don't read about it. People used to read about it. It was a tradition for, American children to read about it in school and learn from the founding father. And we don't do that. This is a man who knew more than anyone else what the dangers were for creating a republic. And it's one of the great documents. It's really a treasure trove of wisdom from the founder of the country.
So what does the farewell address say? Well, first of all, if someone wanted it, obviously they could just Google, like, the farewell address, and they could read it for themselves, okay? So that's how we can get our hands on it and take a look. But what does it say about foreign policy, political parties, and religion?
Yeah, exactly. So, it's interesting because when most, we have, we sum things up, right? So, we want to know what is the bottom line of what he's saying. And there's this surface level message in the farewell address. Most people, they're going to say political parties are bad. They're going to say that essentially America should keep free of entangling alliances. And those are, very important to the farewell address. But there's kind of this underlying message underneath that. And the big thing, I think, is the big message I think he has to say is beware of your enemies, your country's enemies, not only because they're your enemies, but because they'll actually pretend to be your friends. And so he talks about citizens, people in the country and outside the country. He calls them cunning, ambitious. So, cunning being deceiving. They'll pretend to be the friend of your country. They'll pretend to be loyal to the country, but in reality, they're not. And he also talks about deluded citizens. He talks about people that think that they're doing what's best for the country, but in reality, they're actually the tools of those who don't have America's best interest in mind. And, it's fascinating because, we live in an era where you can't question anyone's patriotism, right? You just can't do it. It's horrible. If you do it, you're being bigoted. But the founder of our country himself warned against people that would deceive and were also deluded. And it's right there in the document. It's all over the document.
I have it pulled up here. And I think so that there's number 7. He says here, perhaps I ought to stop, but a solicitude of your welfare, which cannot end but with my life, and the apprehension of danger natural to that solicitude, urge me on an occasion like the present to offer to your solemn contemplation and to recommend to your frequent review some sentiments which are the result of much reflection, of no inconsiderable observation, and which appear to me all important to the permanency of your felicity as a people. These will be offered to you with the more freedom, as you can only see in them the disinterested warnings of a parting friend who can possibly have no personal motive to bias his counsel, nor can I forget, as an encouragement to it, your indulgent reception of my sentiments on a former and not dissimilar occasion. First thing that comes to my mind is, what an amazing, beautiful vocabulary he had. We don't see people talk like this. We don't hear people use these words. These are the kind of words that massage your brain and ease the synaptic firing of your this is the stuff that we should be reading and listening to keep ourselves sharp so that we can fully experience, the representative republic that we have.
Well, he didn't even go to college. So, for him, he learned so much just on his own. But, one of the things, the very first thing in the farewell address is that it's actually addressed to friends and fellow citizens. Now, most of what he wrote were, official documents. They were proclamations. Sometimes he was writing, he wrote a State of the Union to Congress. His inaugural address was, both of them were delivered to Congress. But he decided his farewell address was to go directly to the people. He could have written it, for Congress and had it read in Congress. He could have sent it to the governors or, whatever kind of the formalities. But he specifically wanted the document to go to the American people. And he even says, and the part that you wrote, he wrote to recommend for your frequent review. So, it's kind of like your dad's, I like to compare it to Proverbs. Solomon writes so many times in Proverbs, my son, listen to my instruction, bind this in your heart, because this is something he wants us to think about deeply. And, quite frankly, nowadays, it's not even politically correct to talk about the founders in a positive way sometimes.
It is. It's interesting in that I couldn't imagine a president from either party writing something and issuing it and saying, I recommend this to you for your frequent review. Like Americans would stop, put their phones down. We'd turn our TVs off and our radios and actually read it and then save it and review it again later at some point. We don't have that expectation. And if someone had that expectation, it would be rebuffed immediately, probably mocked on Twitter, and then the entire incident forgotten post haste.
Exactly. And, what's interesting in the document, I mentioned he talks about deceptive, cunning people. He specifically calls us to distrust the patriotism of those who promote, narrow interest at the expense of American interest. And so he talks about political parties, and not just that they're parties that represent narrow interest, but he calls them artful and enterprising, an artful and enterprising minority. Now, back then, he was talking a lot of times on kind of a geographical basis, people that were more concerned with the narrow interest of a specific region. But, the big divisions now, I think, there's an attempt to really divide us by race, by ideology. Political parties take advantage of this. Washington is calling us to be suspicious of that, to question the patriotism. And you alluded to what Washington says about religion and morality. Washington talks about religion and morality. He says, in vain would that man claim the tribute of patriotism, who should labor to subvert these great pillars. So he's saying that, if you're trying to undermine the role of religion and morality, that person should have their patriotism questioned. Imagine that. Again, it's not politically correct to say this. This is what the founder of the country said.
And so talking about religion, because it's such a polarizing subject, because so many people have really been raised in households where they haven't experienced true Christianity. A lot of people are of the mistaken belief that all religions are equal and that America has to respect all religions to the same degree that Christianity is enshrined in our culture, that we have to have all of the Muslim holidays off because we have the Christian holidays off, which is the most utterly ridiculous thing. It's like going to work and saying, I need all my personal holidays off, like my wife and my kid's birthday, my husband, my grandparents, my parents. We need to have all those holidays off because we celebrate the birthday of George Washington and Martin Luther King.
Right.
who would even put up with that? Like, your boss would be like, and thank you so much for coming in today. Please see HR on your way out.
There's this attempt to make the founders deists, and deism, of course, the belief that God created the earth, universe, and then walked away. God, therefore, is rendered irrelevant. But one of the things, and so, a lot of kind of these radicals believe that you don't need religion for morality. George Washington saw that trend coming. He saw that secular trend, and he addressed it in his farewell address. And I think it says something that he specifically wrote this in here because he was worried about it. He said, "Let us with caution indulge the supposition that morality can be maintained without religion. Whatever may be conceded to the influence of refined education, reason and experience both forbid us to expect that national morality can prevail in the exclusion of religious principle." He's saying that, there are a lot of refined, educated people that are going to tell you don't need religion and morality. You don't need religion for morality. But Washington's saying, no, that's not true. And it's fascinating to me that he put this in his farewell address. And he had to put it because he was worried about it. He's worried that someone was going to undermine that. He wanted the American people to review this document so that they could recognize that and say, that's wrong. That's not American.
What, are we seeing that? Because I don't see that. I don't see people saying that's wrong, that's not American.
Yeah, it's fascinating because, when I talk to people, much older, in their 60s, 80s, whatever, they'll tell me that they used to read the farewell address. And so, we're a couple generations removed where we don't do that. The Senate, every year, I think on Washington's birthday, they have the farewell address read. But honestly, no one really listens, and it's just one senator that reads it. And, this kind of is supposed to supplant for Washington saying we should review it frequently, but it's just this formality now. It's just form, no substance. And I think we're worse off because of this. And why wouldn't you listen to your father's last words to you, especially someone who had done so much to create the country?
Yeah, I don't know. I think probably what should happen is that people who care about kids getting this information and having a real respect for it have to be those people who, print this out and read it at home. Ask the kids, have you covered this in government or U.S. history or any one of the classes that they have? And if they haven't, maybe reach out to the teachers. I find that at least for the schools that my kids are in now, the teachers are receptive to me kind of asking them questions. Are you covering this or do you cover this? And they usually will respond and say, oh, okay, yeah, no, we don't cover that, or yes, we do. And you can express to them, I wish you would cover this. This is important. And then you can fill the gap at home, which I think that's something that parents have to be more and more prepared to do, which is you just fill in at home because the schools aren't covering everything. And it depends on where your child is going to school. They might be getting all of it, and, that's fantastic. But for most, they're not.
Yeah, absolutely. And, there's so much wisdom in this document. You had mentioned foreign policy. Washington has a lot to say about that. And, a lot of it is basically the importance of supporting America's interest in the world. People kind of summarize his views as, no entangling alliances. Well, Washington was saying that as a tactic. But tactics can change. It's the underlying principle. And what Washington is saying in this is essentially, there's a great warning here where he tells us to not expect from other countries favors or, to assume that other countries are going to do what's in our best interest. He says there's no greater error than to expect or calculate upon real favors from nation to nation. He's saying we need to be shrewd when it comes to the world because this is a dangerous world. And that's, nowadays people would call that fear-mongering or whatever. But in Washington's day, he understood human nature. He understood that nations and people seek power. He wanted the American people to be ready for that and, not have this dreamy idealism about the world, but to be unashamed about promoting the interests of their country.
So good. Thank you so much for coming on. I got to ask the kids if they've read it. So,
yeah, sure.
You have a fantastic weekend. Richard Lem, creator of This American President podcast. We'll be back with more after this. This is Just a Minute with Stacey Washington. I had lunch with Steve Green, the CEO of Hobby Lobby, the other day. Okay, I ate lunch with about 300 other people while Mr. Green spoke about Hobby Lobby's founding and how their family walks out their faith through the company. Mr. Green showed photographs of his parents' dining room piled high with frames that he and his siblings earned 7 cents an hour to assemble. Today, that company is a multi-billion-dollar international concern. Mr. Green spoke of their latest project, the Museum of the Bible, which is both a technological marvel and a thing of unbelievable beauty. What a legacy of excellence the Green family has left for others to emulate. Most of us will never run a billion-dollar company or design and finance a museum, but our daily work is no less important in God's eyes. Whether it's loving and supporting our spouse, raising godly children, or performing our work duties with excellence, God sees and rewards hard work done as unto him. That's encouraging. I'm Stacey Washington. Find out more at staceyontheright.com.
St. John 1:1 says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." Remember in the Word when Jesus was responding to Satan's antics? When Satan was trying to tempt Jesus with food, Jesus responded with himself. He responded with the Word. There are no new tricks in Satan's book. At the end of the day, his job is to create fear and doubt, and steal, kill, and destroy. So if Jesus, who is fully God, responded to Satan with the Word, why do we think that we can get along without the Word? The Bible says, "Study to show thyself approved." Equip yourself with the Word daily and watch your response to Satan's foolishness change. One of my coworkers, Pastor Joseph Parker, teaches that it's good to read at least 3 chapters a day. Sounds good to me. Today is a good day to start. With a heart for the urban family, I'm today's urban woman, Tony Johnson. Connect with us at urbanfamilytalk.com.
This is House Call for Health. A company in Massachusetts claims it has a wearable device to help battle opioid addiction. Waltham-based Neurometrics claims its product Quell, worn on the calf, blocks chronic pain. In an email to Fox News, their CEO said, quote, "Technology stimulates the sensory nerves in your calf, sending neural pulses to your brain that trigger the release of your body's natural pain blockers. Patients will need to buy the rechargeable neurostimulator, worn in a band, and also disposable electrodes, which each last about 2 weeks. The FDA has approved the device for during the day or at night while sleeping." The CEO also telling Fox that it could help out against opioid addiction because Americans aren't taking their medications as directed, saying, quote, "One of the biggest challenges for any medical intervention is patient adherence." The company says the Quell device and app will launch this fall. For more health news, go to foxnewshealth.com. House Call for Health, I'm Joy Piazza, Fox News.
This is Stacey on the Right with Stacey Washington on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
I think whoever wrote that was not elected by the people and has no right to be subverting the people's will. If he has a problem with President Trump, should come out, or she, and say it publicly, period.
A lot of people are saying crazy things like it's the vice president or it's another Republican.
I have no idea who it is, but I feel like if you get a problem with him, come out and say it publicly. You don't just subvert the people's will by stealing things from the president. You, unelected person. President Trump was fairly elected, whether you like him or you don't like him. You have to deal with it. Go to the House, go to the Senate, try to get lawmakers to do something about it. Go to the voters on camera or publicly with your name. Don't be a coward.
Do you think
Okay. That was an interesting comment from her. And TMZ caught her right outside of NBC Studios in New York, and she had a car waiting for her, and she gave that comment. So, pretty interesting. I want to go to the phones. Paul in Texas, thanks so much for calling the show today. Hello, Paul.
Yes,
Welcome to the show. What's your comment?
Hey, good to be here. Am I online right now? Actually, I was listening to one radio program, but you may be on another one.
Yes. So in hour 2, we're on Urban Family Talk. In hour 1, we're on the entire network. So you're still on the radio, but not on AFR.
Okay, so not on AFR. So actually, I'm being recorded across the ways right now.
You're on Urban Family Talk, which is a part of American Family Radio. So you're still on the radio.
All right. Would you like me to go ahead and answer a question that was asked on your program? And
yeah, what's your comment?
I know that
sure.
I'm sorry.
What's your comment?
Okay, here's what it is. Many people don't really think America's in the Bible, but actually, according to the Bible, they are, as far as we know.
Okay.
In Ezekiel 38:39, it talks about, in 36, that Israel will be gathered back into their country. And right in the middle of it all, after they had been establishing at peace in their land, there would be a country to come against them, and it was Magog. And I've got 2 or 3 little quick things I'll tell you about that, which is real interesting. I've studied prophecy down through the years. I'm an evangelist and I love to get into prophecy, and yet sometimes you have to stay real short, and I will do as much as possible. Actually, when Russia, it talks about if they would go get the Bibles out, Ezekiel 36, 38, 39, gets into it, 37. And in the King James Version, it talks about how that there would be a move Magog. Now, who in the world is Og? I had a friend who came out of Satanism, and actually he was so involved, and one day he finally got converted. I mean, he was truly born again. And after he came out of a hard rock band, this and that and the other, than the Satanism, before we destroyed his books, I picked one up, and I believe it was Satanist Bible, and I prayed before going into it, Lord, protect me. But when I got in it, it was so interesting because it talked about Og, and it was one of the spiritual leaders over parts of the earth, particularly Russia. It said it was over Russia. Every nation has a prince, authority over that area, all the way down to the locals, and said that Og of Magog would come up at that time, and maybe a thought come to him, and he would move down against Israel with 5 other countries. Now, that would be Russia, Magog, and I could go in a lot of detail on that. But when they do, something interesting, of course, they're going to have 5 countries with them. And out of those 5 countries, I've been knowing about 30 years. I used to listen to Jack Vanity a lot, which is really a great Bible teacher prophecy. And it's Libya, Ethiopia, Persia, Gomer, and Togarmah. Togarmah is Turkey. Germany is Gomer. Of course, we know who the others are. And out of it all, when they move against them, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I didn't say anything.
Yeah, this is right at the end. I only be here one moment more, very shortly.
Sure.
And right in the middle of it all, it says that Tarsus, it talks about her and all her cubs. Tarsus is the old land area of Britain, and we're one of her cubs. And the cubs of Tarsus would be saying, are you come against Israel that's been taken back to the sword? But God will defeat that battle. There'll be a great earthquake in all those 5 countries. All those radical Muslims will be wiped out in the earthquake. So that's all I was going to put in there, that I believe there is where the United States is. We're one of the cubs of Tarsus. So anyway, great to see you all. Appreciate your program.
Thank you. Thank you for calling in with that explanation. And so I have heard something along those lines before. And you're right. It is. You do have to make a correlation between modern day countries and where they're located and the old, the biblical countries. I shouldn't say old, but the biblical countries. I am not a prophecy expert, but I definitely appreciate the call and the research and you sharing that with us. So I want to ask everyone, especially if you've been listening for a while or if you're new, basically, if you're alive, to call in for the listener stories. Okay, now I'm saying that. I'm looking for my listener stories sheet. Okay, I might need someone to type in the listener stories line for me while I'm figuring out what I did with that sheet, because I'm supposed to tell you guys to call in for listener stories, and we need you to do that so we have those on the air during the week before Share-a-thon and beyond that. And it's something that we really love hearing from the listeners on why you love Urban Family Talk, what it means to you, what's anything having to do with you listening to to Urban and the different people who have programs on Urban Family Talk. So definitely call in with, here we are. I've got it in my email. And so I'm just going to read it to you from there. So we have October Share-a-thon, and the number for you to call in for listener stories is 877-327-5647. You can talk about how Urban has maybe changed your thinking on something, or maybe, your kids like listening to Abraham Hamilton III. I know my kids do. We listen to it together and then talk politics, and sometimes we end up talking about the Word of God because he has a teaching segment at the beginning of every show. Your story could really encourage and bless us. And so I've been getting a lot of email from people saying how much they enjoy listening to the show on the radio, with the expanded audience in hour one. And I've also been getting some email from people who they might disagree on one part, but at the end, they always say it's good to have a different perspective. And, I just appreciate what you're bringing to the air. And that is extremely encouraging. And I'm so grateful for that. I feel really humble because I get to do this and I get to be on, the entire network and urban, that I get to do both. It's wonderful and it's a blessing. And I'm very grateful for that. And so if you have anything that you want to share, we would love for you to leave us a voicemail at 877-327-5647. That's 877-327-5647. And your story could be an encouragement and a blessing to someone else who's listening. You might hear yourself during Share-a-thon or the week before, and we'd love to hear from you. So give us a call and let us know how we're impacting you. So last segment, and we're about to have our break. We're about to go into the weekend and enjoy some time off from politics and things like that. And I think one of the things that has been interesting this week that we've talked about a lot, obviously the hearings, the Kaepernick story, the anonymous letter. I've read now a few opinions on it. Some people have said, well, it's good for that person to, come out and tell us things that we didn't know about the president. But I tend not to believe what they're saying about the president. I tend also not to believe this Bernstein fellow who's written the book about the president. And that's because the Bernstein guy is against Donald Trump. So it's like go pick a bunch of people that don't like you and ask them to write a story about you. Ask them to interview people in your life and write a story about you. Well, they're going to interview people. And even if the people that they interview say wonderful things, their bent is not going to be, well, she's kind of fantastic. I can't find anybody to say anything bad. No, they're going to, oh, so are you insinuating that she really is kind of bad? If the person says, no, I'm not, that's what I'm getting out of it. Because they want a certain result. Bernstein wants a negative book about Trump. This anonymous person isn't writing the letter anonymously because they're saying wonderful things. It's because they're saying things that could get them fired. They want to have their cake and eat it too. So there's that. And then there's more good news because it's Friday and I'm not leaving you guys on a bad note. Americans for Tax Reform has just put out another analysis showing that utilities across the country are lowering their rates because of the GOP tax cuts. At least 120 utilities have lowered electric, gas, and water rates due to the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. Wow. Thanks to the tax cuts passed by the Republican House and Senate, signed by President Trump, at least 120 utilities across the country are lowering rates. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act cut the corporate rate from 35% to 21%, and utility companies are passing those savings on in the form of lower rates for their customers. So Tampa Electric has lowered their bills. They're actually not going to increase their rates to pay for the Hurricane Irma restoration costs, and they don't have to do that because they have the savings from the tax cuts. Duke Energy in Ohio, which is Cincinnati, Ohio, those customers are receiving approximately $20 million in annual tax savings on their electric bills starting this month. Consumers Energy in Jackson, Michigan is issuing a statement from their CEO. They are submitting a proposal to the Michigan Public Service Commission that would lower customer bills starting in 2018 by approximately $200 million. Appalachian Power Company in Milton, West Virginia, they're saving $235 million due to the tax cuts, and they're proposing passing the money back to the customers in a variety of ways. Entergy New Orleans in New Orleans, Louisiana, they're actually passing on their additional savings by reducing rates below what they otherwise would be, especially during the hot summer. They announced that back in April. Kansas City Power and Light in Missouri will actually give back $34.5 million in ongoing annual savings. The Federal Energy Regulatory Commission recently approved KCP&L's request to return that portion of the tax reform savings set at the federal level to customers as quickly as possible. Northwestern Energy Institute, Quadvest in Tomball, Texas, Alabama Power, Alaska Electric Light and Power in Juneau, Alpena Power in Michigan, Ameren, Illinois in Chicago, Ameren, Missouri in St. Louis. I'll read this one. The Missouri Public Service Commission has approved an agreement that reduces the annual electric revenues of Union Electric Company doing business as Ameren of Missouri. The rate decrease of approximately $166.5 million, reflects a reduction in the corporate tax rate from 35% to 21%. Residential customers using 1,000 kilowatt hours a month will see electrical rates decrease by about $6.21 per month starting August 1st. Well, we're using more than 1,000 kilowatt hours, so. Appalachian Power Company, Milton, West Virginia again. Arizona Public Service in Phoenix, Atlanta Gaslight, Atlantic City Electric in New Jersey, Atmos Energy in Owensboro, Kentucky, Avangrid in Orange, Connecticut, Avista in Spokane, Washington. Are you catching the theme here? It's everywhere, all over the country. Baltimore, Phoenix, Arizona, Black Hills Energy in South Dakota, California Water Service in San Jose, Centerpoint Energy in Houston. This is a result of the tax reform bill. So you might say, well, some of the people are just going to see a few bucks a month. Yeah. And some of the customers are going to see a lot because their homes are not energy efficient, or their air conditioners are not energy efficient, their furnaces are not energy efficient, what have you. Whatever the case may be, it's savings that come to you as a direct result of the tax reform bill. That's fantastic. I'm not going to argue with anybody about whether or not we should be happy that we're saving money and that our utility companies are charging us less money. That's just nonsensical to argue about that. Instead, we should be just, thank you, Lord, and I'll have some more of that, please. Thank you. I'd like some more savings. I enjoy the savings. I'd like some more. That's what we should be doing. So there's that. And then there's also, we talked about the jobs, and then I have this story that I want to go out on, and it dovetails in with the conversation we've been having this entire show about what we do in this boom economy and what we do to be wise with our money and what we do to take advantage of the boom economy. And so one of the things you can do is you can kind of assess your savings. Here's how much money Americans have saved. This article is at CNBC.com, and I was actually surprised to read it. It's 3 September 2018, so it's fresh. A new study finds the median American household has $4,830 in savings account. That's enough to cover minor emergencies and potentially even a few months of living expenses. Overall, between bank accounts and retirement savings, the median, so half above, half below, American household currently holds about $11,700, according to Magnify Money. Yet almost 30% of households have less than $1,000 saved. Among households that report having at least some money saved, the median savings level is much higher at just under $73,000. Now is the time. When you get that extra money in your pay, set some of it aside for the rainy day, for the economic downturn. It's biblical. It will help you sleep better at night. And it's a fantastic thing to do when extra money comes in. That way you're not really missing anything. Have a great weekend. God bless. See you on Monday.